So water scarcity has come to the point where at least 2 out of 5 people are experiencing severe water scarcity right now. And that's expected to increase to 3 in 5 by 2020. So that's the, this is, well, there you go, February 1st. It's the middle of winter, you know, basically one of the wettest times of the year in the US, and yet much of the US is in drought. California's a little bit better because they've, at least the northern part of California, because they've had some winter rains, but the southern part's still really dry. And then Texas and whatever states there are down there. Yeah, so it's still, you know, it's an ongoing problem. And that map, let's say 6 months ago, was a lot more red than it was white. Under our climate change projections to 2090, that's the what the conditions will be more like. So you can see the top of the Alaska and across the northern Canada will have more rain than they have currently, more snow as well. Whereas central US and Mexico will basically be in severe drought much of the year, based on current emissions as usual. So without cutting climate change, reducing the emissions, that's the future scenario. You can see the Caribbean as well. A lot of places will be uninhabitable. You won't be able to grow food because it'll be too dry. And you have to move north, and everybody says, oh, well, I'll go to Canada because you got lots of room up there and lots of land. Well, actually, you know, most of Canada is actually rocks. It's pretty tough to grow things on rocks. Yeah, it's either really boggy or it's all rocks. So I'm not sure that's going to be much of an option in the future. And that's why the World Economic Forum, this is from a couple of years ago, but they said the same thing just a couple of weeks ago, that the biggest risks facing the world are both water crises, you know, failure to deal with climate change, extreme weather events. They've said the same things again. So for about 3 or 4 years now, they've been saying this is what we should be concerned about and doing something about in the next few years, because this is the things that are pressuring us. Now, agriculture is, as it's currently practiced, is problematic because it uses huge amounts of water. Around the world, 70% of all water use. A lot of the water is polluted. Once again, as I say, much of the water that's used isn't reused. It goes up into the part of the water cycle and it goes elsewhere. There's a number of examples of where agriculture has dried out entire areas. There's the famous one in Europe, where I think it was Russia, where they dried up an entire lake and by over-pumping the aquifers and damming streams so they could grow cotton, and now the whole place is just a desert. And you know, California is in the same state, going the same way. Other places, Egypt's another one, some in the Middle East as well. Places like Saudi Arabia actually had, they always hear about all the oil they have, but they have had gigantic aquifers full of water until they decided that they would grow wheat and a couple other crops. Again, Saudi Arabia is just basically a big sand pile. But if you pump enough water, put enough fertilizer in, you can grow stuff. And they ended up depleting their aquifer, and now and they were actually exporting wheat. And now, of course, they have to import it because they don't have any water left. And then have to spend money on desalination. Looking at the larger food system entirely, not just the water thing, but the food production system has a whole bunch of problems which people here have been talking about all week. This comes out of a study that was done 10 years ago now. It was the IPCC, so the climate change guys, science. They did something for agriculture 10 years ago. So there was a similar process, many, many years. People all around the world got together and said, okay, how can we produce enough food to feed the world and deal with climate change at the same time? And they unequivocally said the way we're producing food, the industrial food system, is the wrong approach entirely. This is not going to work. Now that was the sort of definitive statement about where we need to go. Unfortunately, that was completely ignored. I was the only journalist actually at their final meeting, and they weren't able to, it was supported by the World Bank and a bunch of other people, but the biotech industry pulled its support of the entire idea because they weren't considered necessary for the future. And so that report just ended up nowhere. And this is kind of a re-attempt by many of the people involved in that to continue this work that they've done to remind people, yeah, we need to change the way we're producing food. So, what can we all do about this water scale here? Well, the easiest thing is what you do at home. You know, the not having the water run while you're brushing your teeth, low-flow toilets, watch how much time you spend in the shower, or have a low-flow shower, not having water running. I mean, there's many, many, many ways, and lots of good advice these days about how to do it. Changing your lawn from a lawn that requires watering. Grass is not a natural, monoculture. It needs to be, fed and watered. Otherwise, and get rid of your lawn. I haven't had a lawn in, well, I don't know, 25 years because I hated cutting grass. It was boring, and the grass itself was boring. So we just did a wildflower garden that more or less nature took over after the first 2 or 3 years, and the birds planted the seeds for us. And we ended up with many, many surprises and lots of wildlife coming into our front lawn. And then I don't want to say how many times people would come by and say, "Oh my God, your lawn is gorgeous." And then, so the neighbor would be in the next street and I'd see them, fertilizing their lawn. It seemed very difficult to, get people to change habits, even by having an example. I think that is changing. There are a lot of places where people are keen to have a more interesting lawn. Pollinators is a great reason to have it. And there's lots of other ones. It's just way more interesting. And you feel better in it as well. It's just, there's something about that diversity of nature that makes you feel better. So get rid of your lawns. And there are actually programs out west that will pay people to get rid of their lawns. Yeah, because it's wasting too much of their water. So they say, okay, we'll pay you to get rid of it.